Hal is a founder and principal consultant with Connolly Insights, and what they do is they advise in clean energy transportation strategy and IRA implementation and federal regulatory trends. It works with national and environmental justice groups on the impacts of railroads and related policy reform. Hal has a previous job with the FRA as a senior advisor in climate and sustainability. And he helped design the first sustainability program. Now, I'm not so much sure that that's even still going on due to the current administration, but I think it's cool nonetheless. I also saw in his LinkedIn work, he was part of the Climate Reality Project, which is also super cool, and directed grant making and programming to support grassroots and policy campaigns. So those are just some of the little things that Hal has done in his past that brings him here to this place in time where he's assisting grassroots activists in opposing the merger. So Hal, would you like to take it away from here?
Sure, sure. Thanks so much for that intro. That's great. Thanks to have that, and thanks for having me. So yeah, what I'm going to go over today is specifically the safety integration plan that Union Pacific put together in this merger, which is sorely lacking. It's pretty terrible, as you'll see. So let me just this. So you guys already know about this transaction, I'm sure, but this is the biggest Class One freight railroad buying the arguably the fourth biggest one and the second biggest on the East Coast. And it created a behemoth of a railroad, and it's an $85 billion transaction to create a $250 billion company. So this is just a huge transaction that's going to, in my view, surely lower competition and raise prices, but also create a lot of safety and environmental concerns as well. Just you already introduced me, Tabitha. So yeah, I did work at the FRA. I worked on the Hill for a number of years. I've been doing energy and transportation policy for a long time. Um, I've never worked at a railroad though. So if somebody is like super technical about some of the railroad stuff, I'm all ears because I'm still learning myself on some of this stuff. The guy than a rail guy. Um, so the the safety integration plan is really designed to say, okay, we're merging two railroads. We need to make sure it's safe, and we need to make sure these two railroads operate in a way that is both harmonious but also safe and makes sense. So we need to have some real planning ahead of time. The reason that we have these rules in place is because UP merger with Southern Pacific in the late 90s was a total disaster, created a lot of safety problems, killed 11 workers. It also just created months and months, like close to 2 years of like just bottleneck and delays. There's also some, like, I'll get to like, there's some real problems with how the STB is doing this process, which is a real problem in our review of the safety integration plan. I'm going to what I think our ask should be as a community. So the last time UP did a major merger, in 1996, STB approved it. They, as I said, there's a fight. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, somebody's saying that the screen is blank, and that's what I've got too. Is
Oh,
that
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Hold on a second. Let me see. Can you see that?
I can see that? Yes.
Okay. I am so sorry. So
That's
what happens
okay.
when I go in full screen mode? It's not.
It's
Let me
actually shows
see.
up fairly well for me. Hopefully, it does for other folks too.
Okay. All right. So you can see that. I know. Apologies for the like riffraff around it, but you can see that.
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Okay. So in 1996, the SCB approved this Union Pacific Southern Pacific merger. In 1997, when they actually implemented it, there was a lot of problems. Problems started in Houston. Traffic really seized up. There was, horrific stories of just trains not being able to get into yards for hours and hours and hours, just total gridlock, workers having stuck on trains for days on end. The STB had to do all sorts of emergency orders to grant a third railroad access to the track, and it would just create a huge mess, and it caused billions of dollars damages. in their efforts to untangle it all, and like workers were just doing things that they weren't really trained to do and doing it too long, too many hours. 11 workers were killed in 1997. Um, and as a result of that, and some other transactions, including BNSF and maybe on-rail too, the federal government created new rules saying, okay, this is a huge mess. Going forward, we are going to require a safety integration plan that really lays out exactly how are you going to integrate these railroads, how are you going to do it safely, what's the budget, how many workers are you going to do it. We want details. So fast forward to so FRA did the safety part. STB does mostly the kind of procedural part about how the safety integration plan works. Um, they did the rule, and so it, the the kind of irony of all this is that now Union Pacific is supposed to follow this rule that they caused to happen, and they're really not following it. So the it's a 150-page document that Union Pacific kind of goes through, okay, how are we going to merge all these different functions with Norfolk Southern? And it covers, the safety culture, training, operating rules, like alcohol and drug policies, equipment, signal and train control, all these different categories. And basically, for almost all the categories, they do the same thing and just say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to keep the two railroads running separately. Then we're going to review it. And then later, we're going to merge the two together in some ways. And most of the time, they say, we'll just adopt UP policies unless like there's some reason not to. So it basically is 150 pages of saying very little. It just kind of says, hunts it and just says, yeah, I mean, we're going to look over this stuff and figure it out, which is, of course, not what the rule requires. The rule really says specifically you have to lay out all these different categories and how you're going to budget, how you're going to staff it, how like specifically what are you going to do? So like for instance here, like there's no they don't have they have talk about kind of how they've spent money in the past on safety, both companies, but doesn't really talk about, okay, what are we going to do in the future and how are we going to really kind of do this in an ongoing way and specifically how are we going to do it? One example is, and again, this gets into technical areas that I'm not as super familiar with, so our folks in labor would probably know this better than me, but they have two different rule books. So the West Coast railroads use this thing called G-Core. The Northeast, they use this NORAC rules. And so the rules, I mean, there's a lot of compatibility to the rules, but there are different rule books and there's a lot of different terms. So again, like if you want to have a train go on a track, at G-Core it's called track warrant and NORAC it's called Form D. And if you're not preparing for this and you have a stressful situation where we're moving trains on a rail yard and people are using different words, that's a really unsafe practice. Like you have to plan for this. And instead, like they just say, again, like kind of the same what I was talking about. They just say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, eventually we'll have Norfolk Southern use NORAC. We'll kind of review both rule books and figure it out. But there's not like a real plan about how are you going to train Norfolk Southern employees to use G-Core? Like how is this all going to work? And when's it, there's a lot of like vague timelines too that like, oh, we'll do this in year one or we'll do that in year two, but there's not like details on how they're going to do this, which is because of great concern. Another concern, this is kind of like less to do with the SIP, but just kind of operationally, like I'm concerned about, is that there's this says 101 yards. It's actually there's 138 facilities if you include some other things. There's yards and there's also some place where they move cars like automobiles around, where they're going to see increased traffic, like significant increased traffic. And Union Pacific is known for doing they're spending as little as much as possible in capital, and they automate a lot of procedures, and so they're actually the yard controller jobs, the yard masters who really are supposed to control these yards and figure out how they operate safely. They're actually eliminating positions over the first 3 years, so just through attrition, not firing people, but through attrition they're going to eliminate 27 people, even though there's all these yards that are going to see more traffic. And you're, of course, integrating two railroads at the same time. So it's just like it's a big concern of mine that like they are adding a lot of employees in different functions, but this is one function where they're eliminating staff, and you would think that you would want more yard controllers less, especially given their history when they merged with Southern Pacific and there was all these disasters with gridlock around yards. Um, Another kind of like question operationally is like, when a derailment happens, first responders need to know what hazardous materials are on this train. There's something called Ask Rail, uh, and how you'd integrate those two would be really important because Union Pacific employees might not know what's on Norfolk Southern trains. The systems might not be compatible. And they just kind of like paper this over and say, oh, well, we're going to eliminate the Ask Rail number for Norfolk Southern. Those calls will come into UP and we'll figure it out. And so that's a grave concern because, like, day one, I don't want a firefighter at some accident calling and then getting a UP employee has no idea what's going on in the Norfolk Southern network or whatever. It's like, tell us more details about how this is all going to work. Uh, Another just kind of problem here is that, by all the main measures that FRA uses, Union Pacific is the least safe Class 1 railroad. So this is, if you look at accident rates per train mile, which is like a pretty standard way to do it, over the last 5 years, Union Pacific has been the worst performer. They're the worst in terms of like deaths that happen on their rail yards. So UP, like in some of its filings, called itself the safest railroad, and it like nitpicked like one stat in 2024 that they claimed to be the safest stat. And actually, they didn't even claim to be the safest. They said we're the second safest in this one stat in 2024. But even that stat, if you look over the last 5 years, they're the worst performers. So it's concerned that, of course, Norfolk Southern isn't doing great, as you can see here. And Norfolk Southern, of course, had the East Palestine disaster, which people is still in fresh in people's minds. But, you know, arguably Union Pacific is a worse performer, and so it's concerned that they're going to apply their kind of culture and standards to a national network like this. Another, UP has a lot of history here. I talked about kind of their reticence to invest in capital spending. In after the East Palestine disaster, the Federal Railroad Administration said, okay, we're going to do a safety culture assessment of all the Class 1 railroads. We want to see, like, how are you handling safety and, like, what is your safety culture like? So they did this. When they did UPs, they found that UP was coaching its employees on what to say to FRA. And FRA blew up at this and said, what the heck are you doing? And basically, the assessment never happened. So that's one thing I think we should ask for is like if before FRA gives its blessing on this transaction, like they should complete the safety culture assessment that didn't get done. Do I trust this FRA to do a great job of that? Probably not, but they should at least go through the motions. UP kind of points to they say, "Oh, well, we did an independent safety culture assessment." And we passed with flying colors, of course. They haven't actually publicly released that safety culture assessment, and they haven't even told us what independent body did this. They didn't even name like who did this independent safety culture assessment. So I don't really trust what UP says on this. So as you can see, like I'm very concerned that UP is just like of all the class one, they're the ones I trust least on this list. Like that they're in the most need of a good SIP, safety integration plan. So another concern is that this STB is in the process of changing its environmental review rules. And of grave concern is that they decide to implement the new rules in this transaction, even though they haven't finished the new rules, which I, as a lawyer, find that seems like not okay with due process and other things. That's kind of a problematic. But that's what they said they're going to do. So what they've said is we're not going to do. So normally what happens is there's this process called scoping where you say, okay, you get comments from everybody saying, okay, what should we look at when we're doing the environmental review? And they do scoping comments. Then the STB responds with a report that says, that's just called a scoping report. They look at the comments and they respond to them and basically say, okay, we agree with this or we don't agree with this. This is what we're going to do. Then they go back and do a draft environmental impact statement, and the public can respond to that and say, hey, like, I think you screwed this up, or you should consider this, or what's going on. And then they do a final environmental impact statement. Well, what STV has proposed is they're going to eliminate the scoping study. So we may not get feedback on our scoping comments about what they should include. And then they're going to eliminate the draft EIS, the draft environmental statement. So we're just going to go straight to the final. So it's going to be final, and then we get to comment on it, which of course is already final. So we can't really change it at that point. So it's kind of an absurd process. And for the safety integration plan, that in the past, that the draft environmental study step is when we can comment on the SIP, when we can say, hey, like, so at this point, we've seen the SIP, but the FRA has yet to respond to it. And so what should happen is FRA responds to it. We see the revised safety integration plan that UP takes that input, changes it, puts it in the draft EIS, and then we comment on that. So I don't know, because like they're kind of making up this whole new process as they go. But I'm worried that we're not really going to have an ability to comment on a revised STIP after FRA kind of gets its hands on it. So we'll see. But again, like the first effort here by UP is so lacking that like this is a concern that there's like not this procedural steps where we get to comment where FRA has commented. All right. So this is basically like overview of what I think the kind of main things we should do. Let's get specifics in the safety integration plan. Let's like actually reconcile the two rule books. Let's have a safety culture review. Let's like have a procedure. Show your work before, and then before the deal closes so that we can respond. That's a very quick overview. Apologies. I kind of rushed through a bunch of stuff there. Um, but this is a great, like, that's my presentation. I'm happy to talk about any part of it, get into more specifics. I'd love to hear reaction to it, because I'm still learning too. If there's things that people know about 1997 and the integration with SP or anything else, I'm all ears and would love to discuss any of that.
I don't see any hands. Does anybody have some thoughts?
Yeah, I have a thought. My thought is that the 150-page plan is basically 150 pages of saying we're going to have a pet plan later.
Yep, 100%. That's exactly what it is. And some lawyers were paid a lot of money to write absolutely nothing for 150 pages. It was a frustrating read. I don't recommend it.
I guess the question that I I would hope that folks on this call would be interested in learning is, how do you think that we as a group of not just railroaders and laborers, but also environmentalists, can positively impact, or can we even impact this process with the STB? And like, does it make more sense for us to compile our thoughts together, or does it make more sense to hammer on it through the environmental e-filing portal and each of us submit our own thoughts? Like, what do you think is the best, most productive use of all of our time? We've got 17 people on the call right now.
Sure.
I'm curious.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the actual STV process, where we are right now is they started a consultation process with local and federal officials. So this was last week, they sent kind of form letters to a bunch of local officials and federal officials that they think are like kind of in impacted areas. I think they have some gaps in who they are asking, but it was pretty broad. I mean, I don't know, it covers counties in 30 states or something that they're asking people for comment. So one thing to think about is at this point. And those comments, the responses from the federal and local officials is due September 21st. The one thing to think about is if you have concerns about something in your community, a yard or whatever it is, a rail line that's going to get more business or something, or just in general. One thing is you could contact your local officials and ask them, like, so did you get a letter from STB soliciting comment? And if you did, I suggest that I would say oppose the merger and raise concerns about safety and environmental impacts of it. And you could, of course, the more you can like talk about your local story, the better. Um, so that's what's kind of happening right now. The next step is, so I think again, since they're making up the process, it's a little hard to know what the process is going to be going forward. But my guess is that after they get comments from officials, they're going to probably quickly thereafter open up the scoping comments for the EIS. So that would be another opportunity to bring up any of these issues. So I think that so you asked kind of like, do it as individuals or groups. I would do both, frankly, because I think that it's good to show the power of group action, but it's also important to like provide details to say, hey, like I live near this rail yard and I'm concerned about noise or pollution. I'm concerned about grade crossings near like that are blocking my community from getting to the other side of town to the hospital or whatever the local concern or story is, or labor that I'm concerned they're going to shut down this rail yard or they're going to operate less safe. Like I think the individual stories can be really powerful because they don't they're often viewing this as such a big lens that they're not hearing the anecdotes, not hearing the powerful individual stories. So I think that's something really, and I think that goes double when you're talking to your elected officials that they want to hear this and understand. I think elected officials often think in stories. They want to be able to tell the anecdote at the cocktail party or the town meeting or whatever it is in like a short, concise story about how someone couldn't get to the hospital because 3 mile long train took 45 minutes to get through their town is a really powerful story and something they can tell quickly as opposed to like all the stats and mind-numbing stuff that I talk about in my presentations. Like the real story is really important. The other thing is that so normally in a normal process, I wouldn't really recommend people comment on the main docket with STB because the STB is really only supposed to deal with like competition and those sorts of issues. But because they're screwing up this whole process, I think people should comment on the main docket as much as they want. Whether it's environmental or noise or whatever it is, just go ahead and comment on the main docket. They've indicated that they want to close all comment overall by mid-November, which seems very short to me, and it wouldn't surprise me if that gets pushed a little bit. But so people can comment on the main docket right now if they wanted to, but they also can wait for this kind of scoping process if they wanted to as well. It's again like so working with some of the environmental groups and EJ groups. We're trying to pull together the office at STB that does this stuff is called OEA. They're the ones who do the environmental impact statement. They're a very small office, but we're trying to get a meeting with them just to like what is going like we don't understand this process at all. What's going on? So hopefully we'll have some more clarity soon once we can actually sit down with them.
Nick, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question so much as just I was gonna weigh in on, and I think Hal's already basically said this. So, but I think our job is to sort of take all of this information that's been presented and try to translate that down into local agitation wherever and it's going to be tough in some areas where like Norfolk Southern doesn't operate directly or Union Pacific doesn't operate directly, but where we can sort of make the knock-on impacts of what this is going to do to the industry and the industry standard. This is going to become the new industry standard and is going to be eventually the other railroads are basically going to have to um, uh, do the same. But the point being that I think the safety is if we're agitating among sort of friends, families, coworkers, the communities that we live in, safety is the most important thing because nobody cares about the railroad until they derail a train in your backyard. Um, and so I think one of the things we all have to be doing is just paying attention for any time that any railroad makes headlines in your area, and then immediately seizing on that as an opportunity to raise all of the safety, the sort of general um, overview of how the safety is in this industry, through examples of like what Hal's collected here, um, and then make the point. And I think there's a window while the elections are happening of putting the question. I personally, I don't think we should think about it in terms of trying to get endorsements for people based on responses or anything, but in terms of putting, people who are going to be campaigning under some pressure and saying, "Hey, what's your position on the merger? What's your position on the merger? And do you have any comment on how they've massively sort of glossed over all of the safety concerns here? Um, and are you going to, if elected, are you going to do everything in your power to stop the merger or not?" Um, and that's also an education opportunity, right? For the other people who are paying attention to that race and to that election. Um, so yeah, that was my point is I think sort of to take what Hal's done here and like he was saying, connect it to local stories and local incidents. Um, you know, I think the only reason anybody knows the name Norfolk Southern, if they're not attached to the railroad in some capacity, is because of East Palestine. And so we need to just hammer that nail over and over and over again.
Yeah, and so you know after East, so I have nothing positive to say about Norfolk Southern, but it is like in looking at the safety numbers, you could tell that because of federal oversight and because I'm sure they got scared, like their safety numbers did improve after East Palestine. And to me, what this transaction will do is reverse that because UP is just such a bad actor and they're just constantly trying to cut capital costs, labor costs, whatever costs they can. And so like that slide where I talked about how they're going to reduce the number of yard masters, yard controllers who are like helping coordinate this. That's because they're really focused on using technology to like operate these rail yards. So there's some people. What I heard anecdotally is that there are people who are now not in charge of one rail yard; they're in charge of multiple ones, and they're like on screens and trying to like remotely manage yards that they're not even like
I can,
there.
I
So
can
yeah,
I
sorry,
can
go ahead.
attest to that really concretely in my area. Yard masters that used to each be responsible for one yard a couple of years back, they went through a whole round of abolishing jobs and offering buyouts to guys. And now there's one yard master position that is now responsible for 3 yards. And then there's a bunch of yards that no longer have any yard master directly responsible for it um, uh, in any way, shape, or form.
I think UP is like the worst actor in this, and like they're going to apply those policies to the whole North Southern network and make things even worse. And then another thing, and Nick, you probably know about this better, like, but they're also like UP's using like they're using more remote control technology of of locomotives and rail yards, and they're supposed to confine them to rail yards, but they're pushing the envelope and doing them outside of rail yards for short runs. And like the idea of locomotives going around without anyone in them at all, and we know that like the industry position is they think there should only be one person on any train in the whole network. Um, so the fact that FRA insists on two people on like a 3 mile long train to me is like two seems too few too. But UP is doing anything they can to cut costs, cut labor costs, anything. So it's just like the idea of like a future where they're going to apply those philosophies to the first transcontinental cross America railroad is really frightening to me.
Excuse me, I have a few
Oh,
thoughts.
hold on, Sharon. Sharon,
Okay.
you got a couple folks ahead of you on staff. Scott asked in the chat, what is our theory of change? Scott, are you talking about your own organization, or are you talking about this call in general, or like, do you have more specifics?
Sorry, I'm sort of juggling a couple of things. It's just unclear what specific actions you would like me to take, or on what timeline you would like me to take those actions, or get other people to take those actions. Like, do you want me to pass resolutions, or do you want me to get elected officials to express statements that they oppose the merger? Is that a mechanism by which that would happen? What is the body that governs this? So would this be like for the state legislature, or would this be federal only?
Those are all good questions. So I think that the first answer is who controls. It's the Surface Transportation Board is going to decide this. So not even if the FRA says, "Hey, we think this integration is pretty unsafe." Like in theory, STB could still approve the transaction. I don't think they would, but in theory they could. So this is STB. In terms of the broader theory of change, I think that I think any and all action should happen. So like both in the STB process, but also with elected officials, STB does take that into account. So bank shots where you're talking to your local official and having them put something on the docket would be great, or like whatever it is. Any kind of noise, publicity, anything would be good. And Nick, I'd be curious what you think about this, but I think that the good news here, so that, of course, the bad news is we have the Trump administration. They're not super concerned about our stuff necessarily.
So can I reel you in just a little bit?
Yeah.
So what is the name of the body? Because I've never heard of that body ever.
Okay. Yeah, it's called the Surface. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, could you type that into the chat? And do they have like a website or something?
Yeah,
So,
that might be a good place to start.
Scott, I'll just interrupt while Hal's typing that out. So Public Rail Now, I'm finishing up a jot form, which is going to help folks submit a comment, but they don't have to go through the process of the e-filing, because it's kind of an arduous process. If you're not a party of record and you want to put your comment on record, then you have to actually be a party of interest, and then you have to submit your comment to all the 757 people that are on the party of record. So what Public Rail Now is trying to do is making it a lot easier for folks. And what you would do is you'd submit a comment to Public Rail Now. We would collate those comments with your name or without your name, doesn't matter, and we'll submit them on your behalf to the STB by the comment deadline, which is November 18th. But in the case that it's the environmental side of things, as far as I can tell, that's still open right now, and they haven't set a final deadline for the environmental comments because of just like the fact that Hal was talking about. It's still kind of open, and they don't have rules, and they don't really know what the heck they're doing. So it's a little bit wonky, but between now and November 18th, you can bet that Public Rail Now is going to be asking everybody for comments. Does that help clarify?
That helps immensely. My understanding is that because I'm on the environmental caucus for the state of Washington Democrats, my understanding is that railroads have exemptions to state level processes. So it's exclusively federal, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But again, the SCB is soliciting comments from state and local officials and federal officials. So it's still important to like raise this if you can, if with folks in the state of Washington and get them to try to comment as well. So they're right now. I mean, SCB just sent letters to hundreds of local officials around the country. Hopefully, some in Washington State have gotten them, and you can bug them to answer it too. Yeah, and just like so, I totally appreciate the nuts and bolts. So it's great that you guys are doing that and making it easier to comment. I think that on the broader theory of change here is that the good news is that despite the fact that this administration is like not super concerned about competition or rail safety or environment or any of these things, there's a lot of like big money opposition to this merger too. So like a lot of the customers of the railroads are really concerned that their rates are going to go up. So they're raising objections. The other railroads, of them are raising objections. Of course, Friends and Labor are raising objections. So I think like to me, like the theory of change is probably getting STB to just reject the merger overall is like our main goal, and that's what we want them to do. But another possibility is that the Surface Transportation Board puts a lot of really onerous conditions on UP for the merger and makes it kind of so unappetizing for UP that UP doesn't want to do the merger at the end of the day. So by making them do so many things. So all these comments, like, so if we can make them do things like to improve safety or reduce pollution or like, it's like death by a thousand cuts, anything we can get them to do, even if it's just like at one rail yard that they have to do a wall to have less noise going to a neighborhood. That's a capital expense UP doesn't want to do. And the more we do those kinds of things and those kinds of comments, the more likely we're going to settle this transaction.
Thanks, Hal. Steve, you had your hand up, but I see you took it down.
I'll pass.
Okay, Sharon?
Yes. My thought was I wondered if Hal could share his slides with the people who attended this session, because that would help us get our heads around what he said. It's basically notes of what he said.
Yeah, happy to.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. How will I make sure that you have my email to send me the slides,
So
Tabitha?
So you registered for this call. I have your email through the Zoom. And what I can do is Hal will send me a link to his slides and I can send it to everybody that was registered for this call.
Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
But the other thing that occurred to me is it appears to me that the government agencies are not doing their job, among other things that are problematic here.
Yeah, agreed.
So I've been told that Ron is on stack. Ron, are you available? Okay.
There is no Ron on the call.
Yeah, he's the 608 number.
Yes, I hit *6, I believe, to unmute.
Hey, Ron. Okay, we'll go to Sharon and then we can come back to Ron.
I just wanted to make one other observation. Not only is the risk factor higher for Union Pacific than other railroads, but it is 3 times the number for the railroads who have the least risk. So they're not only a little bit more risky, they're 3 times as risky. And I think that's a compelling observation to make if we want, for political reasons or promoting the negativity of this institution.
Yep.
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So just a series of comments. Ron Chemico here, former Conrail, former Norfolk Southern, former Amtrak engineer. I lived through and worked through the Conrail carve up in 1999, Hal, and I noticed that you didn't mention that. Union Pacific's meltdown in 96 preceded the meltdown at Norfolk Southern / Conrail by 3 years. And having worked through both of them, although I was not working on Union Pacific, I interfaced at Proviso Yard and other yards in Chicago. I mean, my impression was what happened to us in 99 was even worse. And so the STB allowed Union Pacific, Southern Pacific / Chicago Northwestern all to merge. They didn't. Years later, in 99, they did something even worse, at least on the Norfolk Southern side. But anyway, it was an absolute unmitigated disaster. And I think that needs to be brought up constantly whenever we talk about the failures of the UP-SP merger. 3 years later, we did it again. NTSB failed again and allowed that debacle to take place. So that's just something to keep in mind. Somebody mentioned about, pointing out failures of Union Pacific whenever there's a crossing blocked or a derailment or what have you. Railroad Workers United put together 2 special bulletins this spring. It was really uncanny, and I've never seen anything like it. Union Pacific suffered 5 or 6 derailments in both, I think it was March and April, and we documented it and sent it all out. And I think in both derailments, it was like 90 cars involved and 100 freight cars, over 100 freight cars involved in the next month. I mean, I've never seen a railroad suffer that many mainline derailments in the space of 60 days. And I think that's something also that we can use. My final comment is, I don't know if this is practical or doable. The unions would have to get involved. And when I say the unions right now, there's 6 of them. The 2 Teamster affiliates, BLET and BMWED, the signal maintainers, the BRS, and then also TWU, and now the International Association of Machinists and Smart Mechanical have all come out and said they want the NTSB to just nix this thing right now. If they were to call on their members, and of course RWU and the Moving Forward Network and others to do a demonstration at the NTSB headquarters, might be something that all of us could take part in. I'm not sure if that's realistic, but it might be something that we want to investigate. Like I say, we would have to do some pretty heavy lifting to get the unions off their ass to actually do something like that. But it could be quite a magnificent event. But I'll just leave it at that. Those are just some of my thoughts and listening to the webinar.
That's awesome, Ron. All good points. The one that you reminded me to say one thing that STB, I believe it's 12. I think they've committed to doing 12 public meetings about the merger. So that's a great opportunity to get anybody and everybody to go to those meetings and state their opposition to the merger. So, but the only one we know, I think, they've committed to doing one in Houston, which is good. And I'm sure, one would hope there'd be one here in DC too. But they haven't announced any other locations.
Do you know when they might?
They have to do it pretty soon if they're going to close the comment in November. So no, I don't know.
It just seems absurd to me if that's when they're going to close comments and they're going to try to jam in 12 public meetings.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. It's whole thing's baffling to me.
Yeah, that's absurd.
Well, it seems at least on some level designed to sort of keep the conversation on the level of people who follow transportation and are sort of in this world and away from the general public as much as humanly possible.
No, they haven't scheduled any of the meetings yet. That we don't know when they're going to be.
Nope.
And
So do you have, oh, go ahead, Nick.
well, no, I was just going to say, I mean, those 12 meetings are obviously a big opportunity to mobilize a lot of people and make a lot of noise at and sort of make it very, very clear that there's a lot of opposition to this. Um, but I think in between now and then we should try and take advantage of any railroads generating generating headlines between now and then to maybe call you know, try to work with some local organizations to get some sort of town hall together, right? Where you can have a general discussion about rail safety, but then move that on into the specifics of the merger. But then also, there's going to be a lot of people going out and trying to get your vote between now and election day, and some of those people organize town halls, and so like Hal was saying, you know, that the STB makes the decision on this, but if there's a ton of people, politicians who are forced into opposition of this thing by public pressure, that'll have an impact as well. I mean, we've seen sort of there's all the letters from the attorneys general that have come out and things like that. So I think taking advantage of those town halls and things like that that are going to be getting set up as just part of the normal election circus is something to explore.
Jacob, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I think we heard, the public pressure, the political pressure we could put on the STB, but is there any sort of legal pressure that lawyers or people can do in the courtroom? Some sort. I don't know how easy it is to like put like an injunction on this or to stop it and to postpone it, but I really don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but is there anything possible like that?
So, so on the Enviro side, I've talked to NRDC and Earth Justice about this, and I think um, the I think that they're in kind of wait and see mode a little bit. So usually the way it works is you need to like kind of exhaust administrative processes before you go to court. Like so it'd be an easy defense for the railroad for UP to say, oh well, you're objecting to this process, but we're in the middle of the process. You have to wait till the process to be over, kind of thing. So I think NRDC and Earth Justice are both waiting and seeing, and it could be that it gets unfair to the point where they feel like they should go to court and intervene in the middle of the process. But I think that they haven't, that's not my call. And like they're keeping an eye on it though. So I guess there may be things to do, but it might wait till like the process is over and they say, wow, that was a really tremendously unfair process and we should undo that or redo it rather than in the middle of the process go to court.
Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. NRDC just filed earlier this week. They raised a couple environmental concerns. Let me see if I can find that file and I will drop it in the chat.
Yeah, they basically asked for the way there's all these things on the docket that are classified or highly classified, and they're supposed to be for things that are like, competition sensitive or trade secrets or whatever. And UP's using it for also like environmental information. So they've already submitted under highly classified, whatever, that some of the emissions data and stuff, but you can't see it or can't talk about publicly if it's highly classified. So NRDC asked for open that up. And it's all based on labor did a good job of they had said a lot of the kind of job cuts or moving jobs around or adding jobs. They said all that was highly classified. We can't possibly put that on the public record. And STB said, No, you have to put that on the public record. So there's precedent for this. So NRDC kind of saw the good work that labor did and applied that to environmental data. So
Yep, that was a huge thing when they were able to flip that confidentiality and make it public. So hopefully NRDC can do the same thing, because I think the emissions issues, that is definitely in the public interest to know that. I mean, obviously it doesn't help the competition argument, but that's not my problem, that's their problem. Oh, I said that out loud. Does anybody else have other questions or comments they want to bring to the group, or shall I just reiterate what I already said earlier in the meeting about our call to action? Yeah, so for folks who maybe were, multitasking, so Public Rail Now, I'm working on the JOT form. Adam is going to help me fine tune it tomorrow. So hopefully by Friday, we'll have that JOT form ready to go, and it's going to be up on our website. And I gave that link earlier. Give me a second to find it. There it is. So that folks can submit a comment through Public Rail Now, rather than going through all the hurdles of submitting your own private comment, individual comment to the STB. You can submit it to us. We'll collate it into one exhibit for the STB, and we'll file it as a party of record, which Public Rail is. So all of this is going to be in a nice and tidy email, so that A, you know where the information is, and B, you know how long you've got. You've got till November 18th, just in case you want to put that in your heads. But what we're going to do is we're going to be sending out these reminders. We're going to be posting about it. We're going to be sharing about it. And if you have registered for this particular Zoom, you are definitely on the short list of people who is most interested in making these comments. So you will get that information. Hal is also going to send me a copy of the slides that he shared tonight. I will include that in the email. And then we also have, this is the recording. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this up on our YouTube channel, and you are welcome to share it with your friends and allies, and to turn up the heat on the STB, on your elected officials, to make comments, make statements, show up, be heard, share your concerns about what this mega merger would mean for your community, your trackside communities, what it means to you as a consumer. Because what we know and what we've seen is once you lose access to shipping routes, your shippers are going to have to put that on trucks. That rate of that they're going to pay for the goods and services is going to go up. The reliability of your consumer goods is going to go down because you've got one mega merger happening. They don't care when you get your stuff because they've already got their pay, and they're paying out for their giant dividends and Wall Street buddies. So what's important for you as working class people to know is that this merger is going to impact you, whether you live beside a track or not beside a track. Eventually, it's going to hit you in the pocketbooks, and it's going to hit you in your wallets. At the end of the year, you're going to be like, why is everything 45% higher than it was 2 years ago? Well, that's because there's a giant mega merger and Wall Street got rich off of this. So that's me putting it all in a short little nutshell. Also, because Adam is still muted for some reason, and I usually would let him jump on that soapbox. But so this is all going to impact every single person in the consumer working class. And it's important we step up and we speak out when we can and where we can. So we're trying to make that as easy as possible. All right, folks. Well, thank you, Hal, for coming on and sharing all of this information with us. It's an unfolding event. Like Hal said, we're not quite sure what they're doing because they're changing the rules as we go through the game. So things might change at a moment's notice. Just stay tuned, follow the social media, follow your emails, check in if you've got questions and let us know. But we will continue this conversation in a month. And again, Hal, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for coming on. Bye, y'all. Have a good night.
Thanks, Al. Bye, everyone.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.